One of the most watched races in November's election will be between Democratic former Governor Roy Cooper and Republican Michael Whatley for the U.S. Senate.
That heightened focus has recently drawn attention to Whatley's relationship with a former Washington police officer who pled guilty in Beaufort County back in 2000 to indecent liberties with a child. Our WITN First Alert Investigates team dug into the accusations. Here's what we found. As the November election draws closer, all candidates are under scrutiny. One race that's drawing a lot of attention is the battle for a U.S. Senate seat between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. Cooper, a former North Carolina governor whose victory would help Democrats try to take back control of the Senate. Whatley, born in Blowing Rock, who was most recently the chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Did Michael Whatley appoint a convicted sex offender to party committees?
Recently, concerns have been elevated by the NC Democratic Party and other media reports regarding Whatley's association with Harvey West Jr., a convicted sex offender who used to work as a police officer with the city of Washington and who many years later was appointed multiple times to positions within the NC GOP. West pleaded guilty in 2000 to indecent liberties with child. He was required to register as a sex offender when he was released from custody in 2006, but petitioned to no longer have to register, which a judge granted. On his Facebook page, West has posted a picture of himself with Whatley. Our WITN First Alert Investigates team wanted to find out exactly how these two men's paths have crossed, as Whatley told WITN's Haley Hollinger at an event in June that he did not appoint West.
So look, Harvey was elected by the people of the 1st District to be a chair. He was a volunteer within the party.
While West would not agree to interview with WITN, he did send his resume, which details involvement with the NCGOP. It shows he spent a lot of time on the Plan of Organization Committee, including in 2021. Michael Whatley was chairman at that time. According to the Plan of Organization Committee rules, the chairman appoints all members, which would mean Whatley appointed West to that position. When we reached out for direct confirmation of that appointment, West only resent a statement that he'd sent to WITN prior to that, which did not directly address the question. In that statement, West says in part, quote, "I have never had a personal relationship with Chairman Whatley. Our interactions have been limited to public political events and official party meetings. I respect him, and it is painful to see my 27-year-old past used to undermine his work and reputation," end quote.